Thanks everybody for joining us this week on the Rocha Revolution. I'm super stoked. I'm turning off all my windows here on my computers so I can focus. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rocha Revolution. I'm so stoked today to be joined by my good friend, Roberta Braga. Thank you, Roberta, for being here.
Thank you, Chuck. My first live, so
Is it? You haven't been on the Substacks?
no.
All the kids are doing it, girl.
I know I'm the only one. I don't know.
I'm living proof that you can literally teach an old dog new tricks. And so getting on here and finding a way to have community and talk about this, the issues of the day and things that are going on. I want to talk about this groundbreaking work that you're doing that I think is super unique in the space. But before we do, I like to start these conversations with a little background of you and your family and y'all's journey to the country and to this, and then we'll get to your journey to the work.
Sure. So I am originally from Brazil, from a city called Belo Horizonte in the state of Minas Gerais, which is ironically the agriculture state of Brazil. And ironically, because my family moved to the agriculture state of the United States, Wisconsin, when I was 9 years old. For my dad's job. And my parents are actually still up there in the north, near where the Green Bay Packers are from, for people who know football. And so I lived in Wisconsin for most of my life. I studied at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, lived there for a while. And then I moved to DC about 10 years ago for grad school. And I studied public diplomacy with a focus on narrative analysis, which is, I think, my first foray into the space where I am now. My background is in journalism and global security. So that is my story. I've been in DC for about 10 years. I just bought an apartment in the northeast part of the city, and yeah, loving it.
Growing up in rural Wisconsin, near where Lambeau Field is that south of the Fox River Valley?
So it's about 25 minutes from Green Bay and about 45 minutes from Appleton. So right
Right.
around there. Yeah.
Back in the day when I worked for the Steelworkers Union, we merged with the paper workers, and there was lots of the paper industry in Wisconsin. A lot of that industry has been unbolted and shipped overseas. There's been a lot of job loss in Wisconsin. But I think it's super unique and a cultural story of folks that are from other countries whose folks immigrate here. They grew up in these places. Can I ask what took your dad to Wisconsin?
Yeah, you mentioned steel. So he is a metallurgical engineer, which in the US is pretty rare. It's like a subspecialty of another engineering specialty. So he works with metals and alloys. Minas Gerais is the agriculture state and the mining state of Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So he literally is somebody who works in like the chemical makeup of steel. And other metals. So he got offered a couple jobs, one in Wisconsin, and he really liked the company, and he's still there 25 years later.
Well, one is it seems like you come from a long line of smart nerds. I respect
Uh,
that.
he is very nerdy in this.
Right, right. And I think that even though you're not in that type of nerdiness, there is a nerdiness about what you do. And I do, to be honest, like regular folks are like, what do you do? My mom, I try to say, well, I do politics. She's like, I don't know what that means. You do politics, right? Uh, when I worked in the mill, and I was one of the last, and I'm still one of the last working class, regular folks who get to do political consulting. So you should know that I worked on a mill that made rubber for tires. And so we would take the raw rubber, synthetic rubbers, then we would mix it with natural rubbers. Then we would add sulfur and other chemicals. We'd put in this big mixer grinder, then input and inject oil and carbon black, which is just soot, to make the rubber for the tires, right? So like we had to know something about chemical engineering as well, like your father. And then when I went to work, I left the mill, went to work for the union locally, then nationally, I got to tour these other factories. And thinking about your father is that working on a blast furnace in a steel mill, where you have to take all these alloys of raw ore that they would mine from Minnesota, add recycled ore to it. It's a really big, like you need somebody like your father to make sure you get those mixtures right, because folks don't understand that the steel in the World Trade Center was custom made. and it was custom made in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And the alloys and the way that they built that was the strongest steel that had ever been built. That's why that building stood for so long after it got hit by those planes. I know it's a horrific thing, but thinking about the building's not the horrific tragedy of that day. Until today, where the alloys and the composition of steel and metals is so much weaker because we're trying to do it cheaper from other countries. And so Chinese steel, Japanese steel, Russian steel in particular is much, much, look at us nerds. It's
I know,
much,
I think my
much
dad would love
less.
this conversation,
He
though.
would,
He
you
would
got to
know,
send this
he
to
would know.
him. It's
I was like,
much
it goes a
weaker.
little above my head, but he would know exactly what goes into this.
I'm the last Democratic political consultant with calluses on my hands who knows about steel alloys.
Yeah. I
Now
worked
tell him,
the foundry, summer jobs as you do in high school. He put me to work in the foundry receiving dock. So I was
oh,
at 16, the person that received the truck drivers that would deliver the parts to the foundry. So that was a very
I
formative.
mean this in a very non-sexist way, but I'm sure you were very popular with truck drivers.
Love it. It was a weird thing, but I got really good. I'm great at diplomacy and communication. So I
Life
actually
lessons.
liked meeting them and talking to them.
How do you deal with these lonely men who've been on the road for hours driving trucks? And this young thing comes out just ready to say, what are you going to put up? What are we going to do here? Okay, yeah, I'm in charge. Anyway,
I learned a lot.
tell us now what you do and explain to folks what your job is and what you do here in DC.
Sure. So I am the founder and executive director of an NGO called the Digital Democracy Institute of the Americas, which is a mouthful. So DDIA for short, or DIDIA in Spanish. And what we do is we focus on understanding how Latinos and Latin Americans engage with information ecosystems online. And so that is used for helping folks become more resilient to online harms. And when I say online harms, I'm talking about misinformation, so false and misleading information, disinformation, extremism, hate. But it also includes things like scams and fraud. And so we do three things at DDIA. We do research. It's a lot of like talking to humans to understand what they see and believe and why, and what viral things they engage with, and who do they trust, and how are they using AI, and all of that. We take everything that we learn on social media, including in 3,300 public WhatsApp groups that we study, and we apply it to what we call capacity building and interventions work. So essentially trainings, workshops, and creative things that will help Latinos kind of identify weird things on the internet. So for example, right now we're working with a bunch of comedians on a comedy stand-up show that will integrate media literacy into the show. And so people who attend these comedy shows will get a laugh, and they'll get a little bit of useful sort of red flags to keep an eye out for when they engage with weird things on the internet. So it's stuff like that.
And who is using the information and the research that you're doing?
So I call them frontline communicators, which is a very nerdy way of saying essentially, so Latino journalists, English and Spanish language journalists, content creators and influencers that are talking to Latino communities, civil society leaders, so people in the states that talk to voters, and from time to time, I would say policymakers and elected officials. So really, this information is to help the people that talk to our communities to understand what folks might be coming across and why, and then help them better engage them and help them become more, I would say, like healthier consumers of the online world.
And do you see a difference in the research that you do with scams, fake news, or other disinformation in Spanish compared to English, if you have anything comparable to measure?
Yeah, we do. So we've been tracking English and Spanish since we launched in 2023 on all the social media platforms, and then I mentioned on WhatsApp. The internet, as we know, is very borderless, but are in unique positions because we are really, really multilingual, multicultural, and very connected to things that are happening in the US and Latin America, especially people from other countries in the region. So yes, a lot of what we see spreading online, including the harmful stuff in English and Spanish, can mirror one another. So it does sort of cycle and repeat and things like, election fraud claims get recycled over and over. But Latinos are consuming things a little bit differently because we have our fingers in a lot of different worlds. And so we're paying attention to trends in the region in the US. And I would say sometimes Spanish language is underserved in the United States. So the social media platforms and other stakeholders until recently really weren't prioritizing our communities in these digital spaces. I think that's starting to change, but um, I do think that our communities kind of remain underserved, and that's part of why DDI exists because we wanted to really center Latinos both in the research that we do, but also in the way that we engage and intervene to help them navigate polluted stuff on the internet.
And I see that as a big difference. If you're talking about you called it the online ecosystem. I wrote it down when you were talking because I was like, ooh, I'm definitely going to steal that. And if I think about white people and white people in America, their online system may not draw them back to British or back to Germany or
Mhm.
back to France. But because, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, but because me being a quote unquote Latino expert, Latino vote expert, and y'all should know that I am the leading expert because I'm the oldest, not because I'm the smartest, that I have learned in talking to Latino voters over a long period of time that we act a little bit different than the normal voters because we're on average of anywhere between 10 and 15 years younger than that voter in a particular state, some states not as broad as others. So we act more like a younger person and we haven't been here as long. And Roberta, is that one of the reasons? And is there another reason that would make somebody whose parents came from Colombia or came from Brazil or came from, you name Central American country, that they would be scrolling around the news feeds or influencers in America in their own uh, peer group, I think y'all call it, and then also picking up content from where their parents came from. Is
Yeah,
that
so
right?
I would say a lot of the accounts, shows, cultural stuff that our communities are consuming might be based in Latin America. So, for example, a lot of the voices that spread stuff that we track are people that might be in Argentina or Colombia or Mexico, but they're talking about the United States. And a lot of our communities in the United States might be consuming those voices, those accounts, or content from those accounts. And then vice versa. A lot of the like Latino accounts in the United States are going to be referencing things that are happening in the region and vice versa. I would also add a lived experience. So a lot of our communities, like for example, when we talk about corruption, I am bringing a perspective of what I know corruption looks like in a country like Brazil. Um, and so I think the lens with which we're interpreting information that we take in brings those lived experiences. And I think that's a little bit different from the like English speaking American born white person.
And that's the difference between the different ecosystems that they are then consuming in, right?
I think
Another
that too, like Latinos are very on YouTube or very on WhatsApp. WhatsApp is an encrypted platform. So things go viral in WhatsApp and get forwarded many times, but you can't see where it came from necessarily. So I think the places where we're getting our multilingual information is also slightly different.
in the rise of the internet, the rise of hate on the internet, the rise of more fraud because it's growing. Now you have AI. Did you see things online that pertain to Donald Trump or things about Donald Trump that do you think I don't want to put this on him. I don't want to put it on his backers. But what I had heard, sound like Donald Trump now. This is what I heard is that there's just a lot more of these Spanish speaking, let's call them influencers, people that are putting out content back 2, 3, 1, whatever in the past about Donald Trump that just ain't right. Like he's going to give us all $1,000. He's going to give us all this. We'll get some Trump. But whatever the thing is there? I don't want to blame Donald Trump, but I want to say that has it come to be a bigger problem under Donald Trump?
Um, so I think that Donald Trump, he's not the reason the internet changed, but I think that he knew how to capitalize on the changes that were coming. And the thing that I think is different is that he puts out misleading or decontextualized information, which is a lot of what we see online now, is like disinformation or misinformation or conspiracies usually have like a little grain of truth to them and they get kind of twisted. And that's what we're dealing with. So it's hard because things aren't outright lies and they're not outright true, but they are problematic in that way. The thing that he does really well is that he overloads the internet with that false and misleading stuff, so much so that you, like, barely know what to focus on. You get tired, you disengage. Um, Steve Bannon named this tactic of Trump's. It's called muzzle velocity. So, like, you
Oh,
essentially
no, I
shutting
grew up in
somebody
East
up.
Texas. I know muzzle velocity.
Yeah, and so I think that the, like, information overload is just as big of a problem as misleading and false information. He combines the 2 things, and whenever something big is happening, you notice that he starts talking about all these random things that are very confusing, might be misleading, and it distracts from the real problem that people wanna focus on. So, the Internet's very conducive to things like that, also very shocking information, very rage-inducing information, like, he knows how to do that pretty well.
And now that you've kinda come of age doing this work, I've watched you go through different iterations of this kind of work. Tell the folks that listen to this who are very much nerds like me and you know the electoral system, are curious about different tactics and things. One thing that I know you're touching on more than just politics as you're perusing the internet, you're looking at culture, you're looking at the way people consume, you're looking at tactics folks are using to, I would call what I'd call it fake news, but I'd also say to to do harm, like of a scam, like an AI scam, right?
Yeah,
Like
to manipulate us, to manipulate.
manipulate. That's the word I want. So have you seen these tactics become more of a problem when it comes to politics? Because I know you're not just looking at politics, but when I'm trying to get some influencer to say something nice about a Democrat because they may have a pro worker stance or a pro working family stance, folks could also hire that same influencer to say that the Republicans are going to give you a tax break on your tips, even though you're probably not getting taxed on them anyway, just to try to get you to vote for them.
Yeah. So I think as we know, and I study public relations, so like propaganda and like these manipulation tactics, they are not new. Like they've been around forever. I think what has changed in the political sphere is again, like the volume with which we're seeing this and how decentralized our consumption of information and news and political information has become. There are specific tactics that get used over and over that we see all the time. So, an example of that is emotional language. So, anything like big headlines with these incendiary claims or very angry things or very shocking things. Emotional language is huge right now. Like, it's how you get clicks and engagement. People know that. Um, there's a nerdy term for like ad hominem attacks. It's like when you attack the person that's speaking to distract from what they're saying. So again, like not necessarily new, but we see that all the time. Um, Another nerdy name, false dichotomies. So think of like an argument that has 10 potential solutions. A false dichotomy is a manipulation tactic where somebody is going to pull 2 solutions and they're going to have you focus only on that. So it's a manipulation tactic because it pulls your brain into only thinking that it's like one or another solution and it makes you ignore like the 8 other potential solutions. Um, Scapegoating, I think, is one our communities are really familiar with because immigrants are targeted with that. So it's essentially like picking a common enemy and focusing and blaming on that group or that individual for all of society's problems. I think definitely immigrants are getting scapegoated a lot. So there are like 10 of these manipulation tactics that we usually teach people to identify on social media so they
Can you
can
give
feel
us can you
better.
give us one?
Those 4 were some of them. I think that there are like other
Like
things like,
examples of those. So like if you said
oh,
the names of the
uh,
things I couldn't the names of yeah, I don't understand what you're talking about.
sure. So, scapegoating is an easy one. So when when immigrants get blamed for the economy of a certain city not going well. So, for example, if you remember Trump saying that Haitians were eating cats and dogs,
Mhm.
we got kind of stuck on the ridiculousness of that statement, but it was symbolic. Like a lot of his followers understood he didn't literally mean Haitians were eating cats and dogs. What he was saying is, I am blaming Haitians for the problems in this city. And that is a way to scapegoat immigrants. Um, Other things that we see, for example, when people claim that dead people are voting, they are taking like one example of one really obscure thing that might have happened and having you focus only on that so that you think it's a much bigger problem than it is. Same with non-citizens voting. Like we know that does not happen at scale. We know that even when it on occasion happens, there's no way that it would influence an election outcome. But they repeat that over and over and over, and they scapegoat our communities so much that you start to believe that it's this huge, huge problem. And so it's stuff like that where like it's really predictable because we see it in Colombia, we saw it in Brazil, we've seen it in every election that I've looked at since 2018.
Can I
It's
interrupt
the
again?
same stuff. Sure.
When you say you've seen it in those countries, it wasn't those countries, or maybe it is, trying to influence the US elections. You're talking about the influence that the internet has on their own elections.
Yeah. So that's why I think like we talk about disinformation being kind of this like unsolvable problem, but to me, it's not because the narratives and the manipulation tactics are really predictable. Like they recycle all the time. So part of what we want to do at D-Day is kind of connect those dots for people so they know. So for example, even in the 2018 presidential elections inside of Colombia, there were claims that dead people were voting. In 2022, in their midterm elections, I went as an observer, an election observer, focusing on the online world. And I talked to their electoral body, like their election management body,
Mhm.
and they had created TikTok content making fun of that claim, where like they dressed up people in zombie costumes to make the point of how ridiculous it was that people were claiming that dead people were voting when they weren't. So that shows you it's like it's the same stuff in different elections in different countries over and over. And I think we get surprised by it still because we're not always paying attention to all those other contexts or we forget. We have short-term memory, but it's pretty predictable. So, yeah.
A couple more questions about the work because the nerdy people like me really love this, and I'm trying to get into it. I think it's fascinating about what you're saying. Uh, can you give me an example or give me an idea of now the added artificial intelligence piece of this? Is this affecting any of this?
Yeah, it is. So AI essentially reduced the barrier to entry for harmful stuff on the internet. So anybody who wanted to create something false or misleading would be able to do it much more easily now than before. I think that AI has made it so that we are all a little bit more skeptical and uncertain of everything we see online. So we talk to a lot of Latinos who tell us they think they're seeing way more AI generated stuff on their feeds, like on TikTok and Instagram, than they were in previous years. They have really good instincts about when things are AI generated, but they don't know what to do with that or like how to check for sure. So then they just start like distrusting everything that they see and assuming it's all AI generated. And I think that's a problem because a democracy needs kind of a shared set of facts. And when you distrust everything and you don't think anything is real, you disengage. And that's a problem. But I also think that AI is causing us to focus on whether things are AI generated. So fact checkers and journalists are now like spending a lot of time helping people decide whether something's AI generated when really what we need is like somebody covering the money behind bad stuff and like why are they doing it and what they're trying to get you to do. So it's like a volume problem. It's a barrier to entry problem. And I think it's a distrust problem. I think we're going to see this in the Brazilian elections in October. We already are. So I don't mean to talk too much, Chuck, but cut me
No,
off.
no,
But like
that's
an
wrong.
example, a really good example of this. So in April, a journalist friend of mine at the BBC covered the story in Brazil where um, one of the biggest influencers that was getting a lot of traction around the like tariff stuff the US was imposing on Brazil, I don't know if you remember that,
Mhm.
was an account called Dona Maria. It was an older, elderly Black Brazilian woman that was an AI avatar. She was not like a real person in any way. It was just like an Uber driver, a rideshare driver, created this account of this Black woman. And she would just angrily criticize Lula, the president of Brazil, and like the Supreme Court and a bunch of the policies. And she had a huge following. Like one of her videos generated 8.8 million engagements or something like that. And people knew, I think, that she was AI generated. It wasn't hiding. The account wasn't trying to hide it. Um, but she had this huge following, so people were treating her like a political commentator. So what happens? Like, who is responsible for that when an avatar creates lies or when an avatar attacks people? Is it the Uber driver who created the account? Is it the social media company? Are we supposed to know that it's fake? Does it matter that it's fake? So, like, what happens when there are like 1,000 of Dona Maria in the political ecosystem? I think it was like a really interesting warning. Like a bunch of Congress members eventually got some of the companies to take the account down, but it didn't really matter. The guy was able to create other accounts, and other people sort of copied Dona Maria and created their own avatars. So, like, our laws don't really govern this stuff yet, and we're pretty behind on it. So, it's something to keep an eye on for elections because it's diluting our ability to have like real nuanced conversations on the internet about democracy issues. So, yeah.
Let's talk about solutions because now we have dug into the problem, and you are one of the only people out here in this space that's identified a problem, talking about the problem, looking at the way that folks are using these different platforms, whether they're WhatsApp groups, whether they're YouTubes, whatever they are. What are some of the things now that you're trying to do? I'd probably call it educating the public, but I'll let you define it of what you do now to try to fix all of this.
Yeah, so there are solutions on the demand side, so like on the consumer side, the you and me side, and there are solutions on the supply side, so like addressing the bad actors or regulating the platform. So on the demand side, there are a lot of organizations that are trying to do the thing that I mentioned earlier. So it's help people become more literate online. So, like, what are the red flags they can look out for of manipulated content? Like, how can they teach their families how to verify whether something is true or not? An example of that, if your dad or my dad sends me a video from YouTube and he thinks it's weird or he thinks it's like a news channel, what can you do to help your dad figure out whether it's a good or not, or a good thing or not? You can do something easy. You can go into the YouTube account name and you can check when the account was created and where it's located in the world. And if it's pretending, so for example, if this account was created last week and it's located in Nepal and it's pretending to be a US newsroom, you know there's something weird about that. So, like, we are helping people do that kind of thing, like, understand what they can do themselves to, like, stop and analyze and verify. And then on the supply side, it's a lot of policy work, actually. So, there's like a whole effort around regulating AI companies. So, how do they create the AI in a responsible way, in a way that doesn't extract our data or violate our privacy? On the social media side, there are a lot of pushes to hold companies more accountable for bad things that happen. So there was a bill that passed. Actually, Melania Trump was a part of this um, to punish people who create deep fakes of women, like sexualized deepfakes. So essentially, the like anything that is criminal on the offline space ideally should also be punished in the online space. And I think there's still some work to do on that side. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of media literacy stuff on the people side, and then a policy stuff on the company side.
Can you tell the folks listening where they could go uh, at DDIA to find information or look at one of your studies or how they could get more involved in learning more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can go to our website or find us on any social media. So, The website is just www.ddia.org. We're also on Instagram. We're on YouTube. We are on Blue Sky. So it's usually some form of DDIA_org. That's our account on Instagram, for example. And then you can follow my accounts if you want. So I'm Roberta Braga, anywhere really on social
I
media.
think folks probably can figure out how to spell
Yeah.
Roberta, but
I
tell
hope
them how
so.
to speak Braga.
Braga. It's like the city in Portugal, but our family's not from that city. So
Well, it couldn't be any more confusing. Yes, okay. Um, so you have an election coming up in Brazil in October before the midterms here. You've already seen all kinds of deep fakes, all kinds of stuff on interesting. I think it'll be the wild, wild. We're going to see a lot of that in the midterms. We're going to see even more as we move into the presidentials. We're going to have you back because I want to hear how this evolves. I think this is one of the most fascinating and I'll be honest, horrific things. As somebody who's an online person, as somebody who also is on TV and on socials and get all the privilege and things that I get to see, I worry about it a lot. My family worries about it. Like it's easy now that to take your image, your likeness, and use it for things, especially when you have quote unquote influence over people, which now I understand that I do, and I take that great responsibility. But it also scares the shit out of me because you could be, anywhere online. I'm sure a lot of folks in your world see the same thing. And that's why I'm really appreciative that you're doing this work and that there's not very many folks out there that are doing that kind of work. We're going to end with two easy questions, always the same good questions that I ask everybody. Boy, girl, old or young, I need to know when you were growing up in Wisconsin, in those big woods out there, coming from Brazil, you're in the middle of cheese heaven with all these white people. I need to know the go-to meal that you would look towards the most that would bring you comfort, bring you excitement, and the thing that you liked. I need to know what that was.
okay, so my grandma used to make this strawberry condensed milk parfait. So it was layers of Maria cookies, and I think Latinos know the Maria cookies, with the condensed milk and cream and strawberries. My dad learned to make that very well for us. So he would do that on occasion, and he would just make a giant tub of it. And it is so delicious. I would absolutely recommend you Google it and go make it yourself. It's really easy. You don't have to bake it. So that was my favorite meal, and it brought me back home to Brazil when I would eat it.
For those of you who got on late, you missed the early part of this of me and her nerding out about her father being a metalworking engineer, scientist, slash all the ways to do the compounds of metals. And that's why I brought them from Brazil to Wisconsin to work for a company up there that was doing metal. We went back to the steelworkers and metal and me making rubber in a tire factory. Y'all should go back and watch the beginning of that and you'll understand why her father constructing this parfait is on brand.
Yes, it is.
The last question is in baseball,
Mhm.
when somebody walks to the plate, they pick music that the stadium will play for them as they walk up to the plate and get ready to play. And folks call it their walk up song. Now, if you're not familiar with baseball, other people would say it's the song that they play at the gym before they're going to do a run. They call it their pump up song. And I need to know what that song is for you.
Okay, I have a lot. My weird music taste. I like everything from like soundtracks to heavy metal, Chuck. I don't know if you do that, but I would say the final countdown. And I don't remember who it's by, but it goes do 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 do. That one.
That's exactly how it goes. The final
Exactly.
countdown.
That one.
That is nice. I want to know how hard you go on the hard rock. How crazy hard or commercial hard?
Not crazy hard. So the first concert I ever went to was Disturbed.
I've heard of
So
Disturbed.
that kind of thing. But I do like instrumental heavy metal, weirdly.
That is a little bit weird. I was a big Def Leppard fan back in the day. It's the 80s and 90s rock because I am way older than you. I appreciate that. The first
No,
time I
you'd be
went to a
surprised. I was listening to Always by Bon Jovi yesterday.
no,
I
it's
love
awesome.
it's such a like those ballads, the love ballads from the 80s and 90s. Totally my jam.
Sister Christian was my first concert in East Texas. They came to the Oil Palace. And there was a woman that ran naked on stage, which made headlines. It was a big deal in the local newspaper. Somebody got naked on stage, and it was like the whole church community melted down. We never had a rock band back to the venue. Anyway, Roberta Braga, thank you so much for being with us today. Y'all should follow the DDIA. They're one of the few groups out there that are doing all of this research around WhatsApp groups, social media. We call it the, watch this, online ecosystem.
Mhm.
Looking at fake news, looking at all of the research, all the things that are going on. Follow them at www.ddia.org. Get that from
Yes.
memory. Thank you. That's all I have is my memory. And until next week, we'll see y'all later on the Rocha Revolution. Y'all be good.